You heard from the leader of the opposition earlier, you heard from the Minister of Finance, and you heard the confusion that is taking place as to which organization is really in charge. We heard from the President of GAU saying the Minister of Agriculture has taken himself completely out of sugar and that he has been reinstated overnight in the discussion between the President and the leader of the opposition.
Not at my insistence.
No, not at your insistence at all. You've made it quite clear. So those confusions and with what is taking place with respect to the future of GuySuCo, we're going to have no other than Mr. Colvin Heath London, and I want to welcome you, brother, and invite you to the microphone.
Thus far, this has been a tremendous conference and a tremendous eye-opener. But first, I must say thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Minister of State has left, so I must say the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, members of the head table, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Press Corps, and fellow cane sugar workers. Like Minister Harman and the opposition leader and many of us here, I'm also a product of this industry. I opened my eyes at birth to see Enmore Estate. I was born at Enmore Estate, and I lived my formative years in the sugar industry, where my parent and generations before, like yours, worked and lived. I've lived at Albion, I've lived at Versailles, I've lived at Iflot, Lenora. So I speak from knowledge of being in the industry and hearing the discourse over the years. Unfortunately and unfortunately, when I left permanently the shores of Guyana as a youth, my first job was also in the sugar industry in Jamaica. And I've thus worked in the sugar industries in Africa, Latin America, and other parts of the Caribbean until I left for other industries. I would like to bring to you today, from the SPU's perspective, where we can go as an industry. I'm not a politician. I'm a mere humble technocrat who has a mandate to make this industry better for all of us. The Guyana Sugar Corporation, over the years, has continued to produce raw sugar and molasses. These products are sold locally and internationally, and the revenue generated from the sales are used with assistance from taxpayers over the past formative years to continue this subsector. The changes in fortunes in the short and medium term with the pending oil production and other closely associated industries now see the need for us as a nation to solidify the fundamentals of our base economy, and at the same time shore up and improve on our social structures while also improving our infrastructure, both educational and physical structures, to meet the demands of the future Guyana. It is my firm belief that as education only puts us in a position to avail ourselves individually and collectively as a nation to grasp opportunities, while infrastructure and agricultural improvement form the basis and the catalyst to catapult our country into rapid, sustainable development. To activate this narrative, significant sums of taxpayers' money that supported the sugar industry rightfully must be diverted and spent on aforementioned to push this sustainable development of our country. Thus, the sugarcane industry, part of our agricultural sector and base economy, must become self-sufficient and sustainable. Does this mean as a nation we should get out of sugarcane industry? No, what this means is that we have to make the industry viable again. This means fundamentally that we have to treat the sector as a striving business and not as a mere government-owned asset with all burdens of the government administrative mechanism. Indeed, freeing the industry of this burden forms the basis of a start in the quest for viability. The time allocated to me here today does not permit me to flesh out my presentation and appeal in great detail. However, I will address the major tenets to make this industry of ours achieve the independence and sustainability that it so desires. Facts. In the distant past, raw sugar was the main, and by extension, the major byproduct of the cane sugar industry. Now it's just one of the products, with electricity through cogeneration emerging as the most profitable byproduct. Producing green energy from biomass at prices that rival natural gas. Guyana is at its dawn of the oil and gas sector, and some have articulated that natural gas would reduce our energy costs across the nation. This is true, but we are caught up in a global era of a push and a quest for clean energy, which is now heavily incentivized globally. We must recognize that the cane sugar industry has been producing and using green energy for the most part of centuries. It must also be recognized that it's cheaper to produce electricity from cogeneration than natural gas. Guyana has one of the highest electricity costs in the region, but with cogeneration, we can produce and sell clean energy at between 10 to 13 US cents a megawatt. Conversely, with natural gas, that cost would be between 14 to 16 cents per megawatt. I will now address the sugar industry and achieve what we need to do to achieve consistency of a minimum of 10 months production of electricity. I think I'll stop there. One of the mandates of the SPU, as given to me, was to help and aid in the restructuring and recapitalization of the sugar industry. I listened to the Minister of State and the opposition leader. Both have made very valid points, both technically and politically. We at the SPU set about in trying to achieve this recapitalization because the only way that we can push this industry forward is if we can adequately fund it to sustainability with all other cultural changes. The SPU, and by extension the government, was able to garner and tap into the financial markets, and we have been able to acquire funding through a bond to the tune of $30 billion. I must advise that it was not the assets of GuySuCo that were used to garner this bond, but the assets of NISIL and all the primary and secondary companies within NISIL. But to underpin this exercise of repayment, the value from these entities and the assets of GuySuCo should be garnered to repay this bond. The funds garnered thus far is in excess of $17 billion. We have put the remaining of funds on a temporary hold until we can start our implementation exercise. Based on what the sugar industry wanted to do, their 3-year plan was to implement 2 cogeneration plants at the Albion and Iflot estates, and to also equip the factories to produce plantation white and secondary packaging equipment. We, the SPU and NISIL, are working with GuySuCo to formulate the necessary committees to implement these projects along with other stakeholders. GuySuCo has successfully completed feasibility studies in both areas, and GuySuCo is working assiduously with the SPU to try to implement these projects as quickly as possible. Coming back to electricity generation, we must pay attention to the lessons learned at our cogeneration plant at Skeldon and the strides that Skeldon Energy Inc.'s team has made in bringing about a change of fortunes of that plant and the methods currently being implemented to sustain a longer sustainable period. They no longer only use bagasse for electricity generation. They use wood and residue from our timber industry. They've gone ahead and planted high fiber grass and high fiber canes so as to complete this production cycle. It is our hope, the SPU's hope, that within the next 18 months that we can complete the implementation of the 2 cogeneration plants, namely at Albion and Iflot. And it is our hope also that we can start and complete the implementation of value-added sugars, plantation white, along with other associated sugars. Now, we must understand the marketing cycle. Gone are the days when we in Guyana should be the net producers of raw material for the industrialized world. We need to ourselves now garner the capacity to produce a final product which we can sell to the industrialized world and our region. And this is a quest, I would like to say, of the SPU and GuySuCo. For example, if 12 tons of cane, I know my colleagues would say that is not efficient production, but if 12 tons of cane produces 1 ton of sugar, and we sell it on the world market for $200+ and now it's $100 and something, while our production cost is in excess of $300, we cannot be sustainable. We have to run the industry as a business. We have to revitalize and we have to spend money so as to improve our practices and to produce a finished product. So let's look at a scenario again. If 12 tons of cane produces 1 ton of value-added sugar, which we can get upwards of $300+, and in some instances, locally, upwards of $500. And that same 12 tons of cane produces molasses, which we can sell upwards of $100+. We're already in excess of $500. But that same 12 tons of cane can produce in excess $400 worth of electricity. It tells us that this industry can be sustainable and revitalized. And that should be the quest of the industry. And that should be our mantra moving forward. In all of this, we have to change to sustain viability. The efforts of the industry must be underpinned by change throughout the organization. Change and improvement of our agronomical practices and procedures. More technology must be used to achieve higher yields. For example, global information systems, where digital technology is used to bring precision farming methods to solve problems derived from our own methods and practices. We need to bring more cane farmers on board who have shown time and time again that they can produce cane cheaper, at a cheaper cost, and of better quality. These farmers must be treated and compensated differently to make their efforts more sustainable. Thus, the industry must move with the trend where its only concern is the manufacturing of cane-related products, and leave, for the most part, the farming to the cane farmers and other agricultural sectors. Our factories need to be modernized, and our plants and technology needs to be enhanced to bring out a greater efficiencies. The culture of the sugar industry and our support services and management has to be changed. Sugar has been managed from time immemorial in a top-down, highly autocratic manner, masked in traditions and a culture that in these modern times cannot result in success. This pyramidal structure has to be changed, and a flatter, more nimble structure has to be embraced, where high-level decision-making and problem-solving at all levels must be and can be made in real time at the individual estates, with our head office officials, for the most part, playing the role as experts and a supporting role. Our human resources practices must be geared to foster and reward productivity only. We can no longer cultivate and condone a management and a worker class that wants and relishes authority, but does not want to be accountable and responsible for the results derived. We have to continue training of our employees at all levels. Without training, we cannot hold our people accountable. And it is important to note that each individual estate in our system is larger as a unit and as a business than any other entity in the country. Yet for the most part, it is staffed and managed by teams that have no concept of business and or entrepreneurship. These are some of the things that have to and will change, and which GuySuCo is working to change. Our social facilities and amenities have to be revitalized, because this is a place where we distill our ideas, we quell our frustrations, and we are able to articulate and work through our issues for the benefit of the industry. We must also use our facilities and rich history to garner further revenues. I know Guyana is striving to be a tourism country, and the sugar industry can form that vital part. Sugar in Guyana has one of the richest histories in the region, mark you worldwide. So my fellow sugarcane workers, I've sat here, I've heard the horror stories, I feel the pain, because I myself have relatives and friends in the sugar industry. But I can only implore you to keep the faith, as both the SPU and GuySuCo, and by extension, the government works towards sorting out the issues. The social economic impact on Guyana derived from the fallout of the sugar industry, I cannot speak no more to. We all see and face that impact. But what I can assure you, that we're working assiduously, as Minister Harman said, and the opposition leader intimated, that we should, in reducing and cushioning the pain of the sugar workers through economic and social outreach. We at SPU are presently working at inputs in land distribution for sugar workers that want to be farmers. and sugar workers that want to get into other sub-industries using closed facilities and land. So in the very near future, some of you have heard, I think some of the people at Wales would have heard and seen some things happening there. We have several private sector entities that want to do major things at Wales. In the rice cultivation, the production of gas, the production of other agro-processing facilities, etc. And we are working to see if we can get these entities and entrepreneurs in the space as quickly as possible. Over the past 4 weeks, you would have noticed that there are ads in the papers for the estates that have been closed. And we, the SPU and GuySuCo, we're hoping by what we're seeing coming in terms of firm fixed proposals, that in the near distant future, that we will be able to present and recommend to Cabinet investors who are interested in owning and producing sugar or some sugar-related product. We hope that by February of next year, we should have our first investor developer running one of the estates, and all the other estates, hopefully in the near distant future, would be operational in some form. Our auditors and advisors, Pricewaterhouse, every day articulate to me and put us under pressure that it's important that the estates that have been closed to be kept as a going concern. The SPU, with its limited resources, have been working to keep, at no small token, these estates open somewhat. My friend here spoke to Rose Hall, and I think he was a little misguided. The canes that are going to Albion from Rose Hall this crop were canes that were the product of arson. So Rose Hall is not producing cane 60 tons per day to go to Albion. In the first crop, and I see Paul Bim at the back there, in the first crop, Rose Hall contributed significantly to the production at Albion Estate. In excess of 30,000 tons of cane was sent to Albion in the first crop. And that helped in re-employment of in excess of 500 workers at Rose Hall. Based on what we have been advised by Pricewaterhouse and other stakeholders, we are trying our level best to turn these factories over in some sort of production, because as you would realize, nobody would buy an industry that they don't know can work. So in the next few months, you would see efforts being made to have some form of production at these estates. In closing, I would like to say sugar has been at the bedrock of our culture and remains so and will remain so. But sugar has to evolve to a place where it's sustainable to continue as part of our country's production landscape. It can't be about throwing taxpayers' money at old methods and practices and hoping for that change. Prayer and hope is a minor part of the success equation of the sugarcane industry. Sound decision-making and discipline has to form the major part of this success equation. It is about possessing an understanding of how things work in the global integrated business environment and being sufficiently adaptable and nimble to accept change based on prevailing national and international circumstances. Fellow cane sugar workers, from where my team and I sit, we will continue to work assiduously and hard once allowed to articulate the realities and to bring about change in a sustainable manner for our industry. I would like to now basically thank all of you and your past generations of sugar workers for the sacrifices that you have made and the sacrifices that this generation continues to make for the industry. Thank you, and to a safe, productive second crop and a viable future for the sugarcane industry. Thank you.